Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all from all corners of the world. Please come on in, settle in. Please let us know you are here by sending us a comment if you can. And before I introduce our speaker for today, I would like to remind you of our questions and answer session. The question and answer session will be held at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to send us your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature or icon. At the end of the presentation, the speaker will also attempt to answer all your questions, if not answer all of them. Our speaker for today is Dr. Louise Duval. Dr. Louise is the Managing Director of Blood Lions. She holds a PhD in environmental management with a background in wildlife conservation and sustainable tourism. She has over 12 years of experience in responsible tourism, including her work as a sustainable tourism consultant in South Africa. She is an expert on South Africa's captive lion industry with deep knowledge of ethical challenges in wildlife tourism. In 2023, she was appointed to the ministerial task team to develop voluntary exit strategy for the captive lion industry. In today's session, Dr. Louise will explore how unethical wildlife tourism often centers around the use of captive wildlife animals, highlighting the welfare issues and exploitation they face within the tourism industry. Dr. Louise, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me just start my presentation before I do anything else. Right, Pule, can you just confirm that you can see my presentation
Yes.
and not the presenter's view?
Yeah, I can see it clearly.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much for the introduction. Yes, today I would like to interrogate both captive and the free roaming wildlife tourism parts and start a conversation around some of the unethical practices in our industry. During the Great Migration, more than 1 million wildebeest, zebra, and gazelle move in a seasonal cycle between the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, with predators lying in waiting. Nowadays, this rare natural feature is reduced to a single spectacle, the river crossing. The river crossings are sadly treated as entertainment rather than what they truly are, moments of life and death. We've narrowed down the last natural wonder to a single event and in the process created an unsustainable and unethical monster of tourism on a mass scale. This phenomenon has become so popular that it has eroded and degraded the experience for both the visitors and the wildlife. The river crossing is an issue hugely complex, which we won't be able to dissect today. But I would like to use this to start a conversation that goes much wider. In my opinion, a lack of respect for nature and wildlife lies at the foundation when the desire for the perfect selfie becomes the ultimate object. I recently did an ATA webinar on unethical tourism activities involving captive wildlife. The questions around which kind of captive wildlife tourism activities are ethical and those that are unacceptable are not always easy to answer, as we all have our own norms and values that we apply. However, there are various captive wildlife tourism guidelines that we can use for a more unbiased approach. APTA, ANVR, SATSA have all created guidelines that can be used to make more objective decisions in terms of identifying those activities that are unacceptable and to be avoided and those you want to support as a tourism business. Here I do a very quick top level overview of those activities involving captive wildlife. All these guidelines agree on that should be avoided. Captive wildlife activities have the following practices in common that should be sufficient to avoid these activities. The removal of wild animals from their mother prematurely, involving cruel training and handling methods. The animals generally are restrained during training and often during performance as well. They're forced to exhibit unnatural behavior. They have no freedom of choice. And importantly, it serves no educational, no conservation value. It's pure entertainment. The first group is performing animals, in particular wild animal trained to perform circus type tricks. But it can also involve a cheetah used as a photo prop. Actually, most tactile interactions involve some level of performance and therefore training. Performing animals may include elephants, predators, primates, dolphins, whales, birds, and even reptiles. The second group are wildlife as photo props. It's also a form of performance. Again, generally, these wild animals have been removed from their mothers prematurely, receive a form of training and handling to make them docile, and are forced to exhibit unnatural behavior and restraint during training and often during performance. If you're given the opportunity to touch, hold, feed, or play with baby wild animals in any shape or form, the activity is unethical according to the SATSA guidelines and should be avoided. All the reasons I mentioned before apply here as well. The fourth group, walking with wild animals, in particular elephants and also predators, and particularly lions and cheetahs, involve again similar issues with training and handling, and then unnatural behavior that leaves them no freedom of choice. We know that walking with lions is a part of the life cycle that culminates in their death, either for their trophies or their body parts. So, but partaking in such activity makes people implicit in their demise. And the group riding wild animals is one that I'm sure most tour operators have already steered away from for very good reasons. Again, it hits all the previous issues and concerns, but in addition, there are serious health and welfare concerns. Even though elephants and ostriches are both strong, their anatomy is not designed to carry weight on their backs. And if that's not enough, wild animals in captivity may be habituated, but they're still wild, unpredictable, and often dangerous. They can inflict serious injury to people when in close proximity during stressful and unnatural activities. In a study of all known predator attacks in South Africa, 40 lions, 14 cheetahs, and 4 tigers were involved. And of the 58 people attacked, 14 were children. 3 children and 18 adults died as a result of the attack. So it's something to keep in mind. So that was a very quick top level overview of captive wildlife, but what about free roaming? Whereas these decisions around captive wildlife activities are relatively clear-cut and easy to determine, our free-ranging or free-roaming wildlife safaris have a lot of catching up to do, in particular around practices that are considered unethical and how to determine those practices. We have recently seen these extreme, unprecedented scenes that we can all agree on, I think, are unsustainable and unacceptable. But what about all the shades of grey between the ethical and sustainable wildlife safaris and these type of situations? There is a set of rules which is widely accepted as general ethical wildlife safari guidelines. And they include things like stay in a safari vehicle at all times. Keep the noise and movement to a minimum. Animals should never feel startled or harassed. Don't drive over the maximum speed limit, something we see in the Kruger on a regular basis. Stay at a respectful distance from the wildlife. Let them decide how close they want to approach. Don't overcrowd the wildlife. A maximum of 2 to 5 vehicles per sighting is ideal, but maybe not always practical. Respect the guides, don't pressure them into breaking park regulations. We have to acknowledge the existing power imbalance between the white foreign guests and the black local driver guides. This is something tour operators can play an important role in by educating their guests about these kind of situations. Don't feel shy to speak out if the guide breaks the rules. Maybe give tourists an easy platform to report unethical behavior and practices, even if it is anonymously. Choose smaller camps with fewer vehicles, not the mega hotels. And support lodges with proper conservation and community credentials, not those who greenwash and conservation wash. There may be one or two that come up a little later, and you may feel one or two rules are missing, which is great, as that is what we exactly need. As an industry, we need to start thinking about what is considered ethical. Oops, sorry. That's my PowerPoint presentation going funny. Yeah, we need to start thinking about what is considered ethical, and also what's considered unethical. Again, I've tried to work in top level concerns to give us food for thoughts. With an ever growing competition within the safari industry, the pressure to provide up close and personal big cat sightings has increased too. People love to get that shot that goes viral online. At the same time, with the continued presence of visitors and safari vehicles in our wilderness areas, we inadvertently habituate our wildlife. Repeated exposure to unnatural noises and smells teaches the animals not to be afraid. The situations in these pictures are not necessarily the result of unethical behavior or poor guiding practices, but can be the result that our wildlife have become so used to us being in their natural environment that they jump onto the vehicles out of their own free will. However, there is a balance between safari vehicles getting too close to the predators and thereby giving them the opportunity to jump on. So, how close is too close? Let's look at that in a little bit. In addition, we also need to start thinking how we deal with these situations and be aware of the negative sides. In East Africa, for example, cases have been recorded of cheetahs getting injured or injuring themselves rather while jumping on and off vehicles with dire consequences. We're talking about a species that's already under significant pressure and vulnerable from a conservation perspective. I watched a video of a 2-year-old male leopard jumping onto an open safari vehicle in Kruger. And the commentary of the guest in the neighboring vehicle was, I want that leopard on our vehicle. So these situations can create an abnormal standard, with the guides being pushed by guests in future to recreate those scenarios, especially when those videos go viral. And we can't become complacent either. These animals remain wild. We've seen it in the captive space. You know, it's still here the same, regardless how habituated they are. Wild animals are unpredictable, especially when stressed, and attacks have already happened. This leads to injuries or even death of a guest, but we all know that the animal will pay the ultimate price with its life, as they're straightaway classed as problem animals. I don't have all the solutions, but as an industry, we need to start having these conversations. How can we handle this responsibly and ethically? Night safaris are incredible experiences, witnessing secretive nocturnal wildlife and even hunting activities. However, there's also an opportunity to do better on these special experiences. Shining powerful white spotlights onto animals at night is hugely disruptive. Any animal's behavior and its well-being. It's therefore much better to use specialist red filtered spotlights rather than the white lights, and even add filters to vehicle headlights, or use advanced night vision equipment. Maybe that's a little bit too futuristic, but you know, there is technology available to observe nocturnal animals without disturbing them. In addition to the general safari ethics that I discussed a few slides back, respectful night safari practices also including not shining the light directly into animals' eyes, not using flash photography, and not disturbing animals, especially during hunting, and most definitely not getting between the predators and their prey. When these general ethics guidelines are broken, we can't always blame the driver guides. Guides are often pushed by visitors' expectations, the hope for better tips, as their base salaries can be low. In many cases, they rely on tips to supplement their wages. It comes amongst others down to educating visitors and guides and carefully managing expectations from the moment clients make inquiries about an African safari. We've already touched on this earlier, but by habituating wildlife and getting too close is highly problematic. We experienced challenges with managing baboons on the Cape Peninsula, where both visitors and residents feed baboons, who've now become so habituated to encroach further and deeper into residential areas. At the same time, expansion of human development encroach further into the baboons' habitats. I've experienced a local driver being forced by his foreign tour guide to stop for lunch at a car park in Cape Point, where a troop of baboons was already present. You can already all understand the mayhem that transpired of lunch packets, guests, and baboons all in the same place. Rather than a true visitor attraction, the Cape Peninsula baboons have become a problem that doesn't seem to have a sustainable solution. And as always, the baboons pay the price. Getting too close also encourages off-road driving, which damages fragile ecosystems and can lead to environmental degradation, which in turn impacts the wildlife carrying capacity of an ecosystem. Professional and successful photographers have also been called out for turning wildlife into accessories, especially in mana pools, pressuring wild animals for the perfect shot, chasing giraffes to get photographs of them running with dust blowing up, creating that really gritty shot without any respect for the animals. Many of these situations also include elephants and lions, images created for likes and follows on social media, images of wildlife for kudos and awe. Professional photographers are setting the bar so low, they're normalizing disrespectful behavior and become unethical role models for all other tourists. I can't say it often enough, but this kind of behavior also creates potential dangerous situations. Walking safaris that bring clients as close as humanly possible to animals, in particular with elephants, is risking lives. This video was actually shot in Mana Pools, where the operator took two young kids out of the safety of the safari vehicle and in the midst of foraging elephants. This behavior pushes the animal's limits, and one day it will attack, even if somebody doesn't behave badly, which at Mana Pools has already happened. This will not only result in human loss, but the problem and elephant, problem in inverted commas, is also killed. As an industry, we even reward this kind of irresponsible operator behavior with awards and accolades, as was the case with this particular operator. And you can see him actually walking these two kids back to the safari vehicle here. In addition, the private and often foreign guides who may travel with their clients on safari, who are also becoming more and more demanding and pushing not only boundaries of wildlife viewing, but also the professional standards of the local team. Not so much to satisfy their current clients, but more so since their work is fueled by dramatic imagery, Instagram likes, and the need to secure the next booking. Some go as far as placing guests on foot beside predators or elephants, not for the guest's deeper connection and experience, but for the sake of content. This kind of dangerous and irresponsible behavior comes straight from within the industry. The images fuel the expectations of people who come across their content on social media. Subsequently, they want such a close-up encounter too, and they may be pressuring guides themselves next time. Adam Bannister actually put it really well in an article saying, "We cannot pretend to champion conservation while simultaneously breaking the rules to manufacture drama for our benefits." We know that cheetah's cub survival rates are naturally low through, for example, predation by other predators, abandonment, poor health, fires, too much open habitat. But it's now believed that also high tourist numbers have further impacts. During a study, researchers found a sighting of a cheetah mother with cubs where 64 vehicles were present over a period of just 2 hours. This study is calling for stricter guidelines, such as not allowing more than 5 vehicles per sighting, ensuring that vehicles keep a minimum distance of 30 meters, and ensuring that vehicles do not separate mothers and cubs. These all feel like very obvious guidelines, but on the ground, the situation is very different. We all know nature is highly unpredictable and wildlife sightings cannot be guaranteed. A dangerous line is crossed when the risk of a no-show leads to unethical practices such as feeding and baiting of wildlife. It will lead to undesirable animal behavior like the Cape Peninsula baboons, situations that are never beneficial for the animals. And regardless of the species and its habitat, the perpetuating circle is the same. Guides want better tips to supplement their wages, and visitors want the close-up encounters, the sensationalist experience for the perfect picture, preferably a selfie, to give them their online clout and likes. Content is king, and wildlife is just a vehicle. In order to create these opportunities, boundaries again are broken in the marine space as well. Swimming with whale sharks is another very good example. And to enhance the client's experience, irresponsible boat operators drop their clients right on top of the whale shark. And in the process, they regularly injure them with the outboard propellers. Excuse me, as you can see here from the insert. So, how do we want to see African wildlife safaris conducted in future? As an industry, do we want to be part of the solution or do we want to fuel the problem? How can we be part of the change in attitude for the better of human and for non-human animals? How can we return to operating with respect and integrity? In my view, it starts by having an open and honest conversation, admitting our own complicity in some of these unacceptable and unethical practices. And by no stretch of the imagination do I have all the answers and solutions. But we can start by evaluating what is acceptable and what isn't. We can then start looking for pragmatic ways and for possible solutions to find more acceptable and ethical ways forward. One thing is very clear in my mind: business as usual is no longer an option. If we have any respect for our wildlife and our natural heritage, we need to find a way to strike the balance between the vital economic opportunities that tourism brings and the protection of the conservation areas that drive African tourism to a large extent. We can't blame just the guides who often part survive on tips. The responsibility and accountability needs to be laid squarely with lodge owners and managers, wheels operators, tour operators, travel agents, and of course the visitors, who unfortunately often see it as a right rather than a privilege to be on safari. A safari where nothing should be a given and every day brings new surprises. A safari should never involve just ticking off a list of iconic species. So we need to reconnect with nature as a whole and start appreciating the smaller animals, birds, and insects, the vegetation that is central to the survival of the wildlife. Wildlife are not photo props that exist for the benefit of raising our online profiles. Lastly, I would like to encourage you to sign our Born to Live Wild pledge. You would add your business to the more than 215 operators, I think, at the moment, that have already committed to not knowingly support any activity that contributes to the cycle of captive breeding, count hunting, and the commercial exploitation of wild animals. Thank you very much, and hopefully we have some time for a Q&A. I hope this has given everyone some food for thoughts. And I think from this point onwards, it's we need to find ways in which we can start identifying those areas that we need to improve on and how. Really, in a way that we've done with the captive wildlife activities as well, where we also started from ground zero, and have built up a good overview and tools for people to use to make those more ethical decisions. So, Pule, I
Well, thank you so
hand
much. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for a very an insightful presentation on unethical wildlife tourism. Like you said, the responsibility is for all of us in the industry, and I'm sure that your talk has, sparked an important conversation around ethical practices in our industry. And I'm confident that the audience has also taken away the valuable insights that you brought with you today. Um, I have a couple of questions that were indeed asked during the registration. If you could allow me just to read through a couple of them.
Sure.
Yes. How would you prioritize the interventions aimed at stopping or preventing unethical touristic behaviors and deconstructing such instances where harm generates profit?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and to a large extent, my answer would be education, education, education. Um, Operators need to explain to clients why these scenes are not acceptable and how they can be part of the solution. Operators need to think carefully about the imagery that they use as well to market safaris and acknowledge that they also may play part in this by creating unrealistic expectations. You know, many of these fantastic wildlife photos are the result of weeks, if not months, of safaris and great patience. There is no instant gratification when people are on safari, and that's something that needs to be communicated to clients right from the start, right from the moment that people make an inquiry. Um, we need to train the guides better so they can be storytellers and bring all aspects of the safari to life and not only focus on the big five. We also need to train our wildlife guides that they can handle um, demanding clients better. We need to give them tools because it's going to happen. They are going to be pressured while they're on safari by people wanting to push the boundaries. So we need to train them that and give them some tools how to handle those kind of situations. those are
Mm,
just a few thoughts, but this whole area of wildlife tourism needs to be unraveled a bit more.
mhm.
And we need to start looking for multidimensional solutions because it's a complex problem.
Yeah, no, that's true. Thank you for answering that question. Um, this one is for later. If you could possibly share your email address, that is Patrick Magezi. And
No problem.
again, another one from Patrick. Hi, Luis. Do those people who captivate wildlife acquire licenses from government? Do you know?
In South Africa, anybody who most wildlife you need a permit for. So there will be some wildlife that is possibly kept illegal, but the predominant, the vast majority of wildlife in captivity in South Africa um, has to be permitted. And those permits are obtained through the provincial nature conservation authorities.
Wonderful, thank you. And Vicky Smith just wants to know that in your presentation, on your intro, you mentioned that you're on government working group. Are you able to just elaborate more on that, please?
Yeah, the ministerial task team was appointed by the minister to look at voluntary exit options and pathways for for people in the captive line industry. The Minister not tourism, the Minister of Environment in South Africa has made a promise, an intent to close the captive lion industry, and they wanted to start with a voluntary exit. So that involved a huge amount of stakeholder engagements and looking at various options for industry players to exit the industry on a voluntary basis. And at the moment, that process is ongoing with people actually, with contracts being set up and people slowly exiting the industry. There is a final report publicly available. If Vicky has interest, I can certainly share that with her.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Another question was, what do you think is the most impactful way a tour operator or a lodge can give back to the community or give to conservation efforts?
Um, Personally, I think by supporting grassroots organizations who are involved in very specific projects on the ground rather than through intermediate bodies, because that ensures that most of a tour operator's contribution reaches the intended course. Um, so, yeah, personally, I would say looking out for grassroots initiatives either within the conservation space or within community projects.
Thank you for answering that. This one is basically about national parks. What is a sustainable solution to countering over-tourism in national parks?
Whoa, yeah, that's not an easy one to answer, to be honest.
Yeah.
There are there are different ways of looking at it,
Mhm.
and I know that people are looking at, for example, increasing park fees. People are looking at capping vehicle numbers. Um, but again, it's not a one size fits all kind of solution.
Mhm.
So you have to look at specific local situations and how what the best solution is. But to be totally honest, um, I think again it's we need to start looking at multi-dimensional solutions. So maybe an increase in park fees that goes back into conservation
Mhm.
is is one component. Maybe a cap on vehicle numbers is a component, but when you introduce these kind of regulations, they're only as good as the enforcement of them. So, with an increase in stricter regulations and rules, you also need more boots on the ground to actually enforce those regulations. So, there's always that sort of flip side as well. So, if we want to come up with stricter regulations, then you also need more money to go into monitoring and enforcement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, in respect of time, as I said, whether this is a start of a deeper dialogue or a
Mm.
reminder of our responsibilities in the industry, I believe it is a powerful step towards, greater awareness for all of us in the travel and tourism sector. And thank you so much for obviously delivering this wonderful presentation today. It will definitely leave us with a lot of awareness. And if there's any questions that we didn't manage to answer on today's presentation, please do send us your questions again. And we will also be sharing the post-webinar recording, where we will also outline all the key summary of key points. And we will also be sharing Dr. Lewis's email address as well on there. So please be on the lookout for the post-webinar recording when we do distribute it. And that brings us to the end of our session for today. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for giving us this wonderful presentation. We are left with a lot of knowledge.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope I've given everybody some food for thought. And yeah, I think it is start to a complex
Yeah,
dialogue that is not going to be solved overnight, but we have to start somewhere. So thank you
absolutely.
for offering the opportunity.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Have a fantastic rest of the afternoon. Bye
Wonderful.
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.